The silence of the vast cosmos is suddenly torn apart by a giant meteorite hurtling at deadly speed. It shines brightly like a second sun, plunging straight into the cold waters of the North Sea, signaling Europe's doom. The terrible collision instantly vaporizes millions of tons of seawater, creating a giant column of steam reaching the stratosphere. A pitch-black wall of water, 300 meters high, forms from the epicenter, approaching land like a hungry monster. On the German coast, the ocean recedes eerily, revealing the barren seabed and rotting shipwrecks from the last century. Curious citizens walk out to see the strange phenomenon, unaware they are standing in their own grave. Then, the horizon vanishes, replaced by a thunderous roar as the deadly wave swallows all sunlight. The port of Hamburg, Germany's industrial pride, looks tiny and fragile before nature's destructive power. In an instant, giant cranes are snapped by the water like fragile matchsticks facing the fury. The magnificent Elbphilharmonie is hit head-on by a 1,000-ton ship, glass shattering like falling rain. Murky water tears through streets, sweeping away vehicles and turning busy avenues into rivers of death. On the Autobahn, chaos reigns as thousands abandon their cars to run in desperate panic. A man looks back, eyes wide in horror as he sees the wave towering over the skyscrapers. No place to hide, no way back. Germany faces the worst scenario in human history. Fuel tanks burst open, fire erupting fiercely on the water, creating a living hell on Earth. A museum U-boat is tossed ashore by the waves, lying helpless amidst the city's ruins. Churning water carries billions of tons of debris, turning architecture into dust in just minutes. The screen fades to dark, leaving only the sound of flowing water and wind whistling through empty windows. This is not science fiction. This is what happens when nature truly gets angry. Welcome to total destruction, the mega tsunami that drowns Germany. In summer 2025, Sylt Island is a picture of golden sun and calm blue sea. Tourists enjoy their dream vacation, unaware that these are the very last moments of peace. 300 miles away, Hamburg port remains busy as the sleepless heart of the German economy. But from 100 kilometers up, an uninvited guest from space dives down at deadly supersonic speed. 2-kilometer-wide space rock slams into the North Sea, releasing energy equal to thousands of atomic bombs. On land, seagulls suddenly scatter wildly, screaming desperately as if sensing the scent of death approaching. An invisible shockwave sweeps across the coast, shaking the ground and shattering rows of glass windows. The strangest thing begins to happen. Seawater recedes rapidly, revealing the stinking, muddy ocean floor. Instead of running, curious people walk onto the mud to film, making the most fatal mistake. On the distant horizon, a black line begins to rise, swallowing the sky and all the light. The gigantic wall of water begins to stand vertically, turning the horizon into a pitch-black color that swallows all hope of survival. Sylt Island, the resort paradise of the elite, is the first victim to suffer this unstoppable fury. The ancient lighthouse that stood firm for 100 years suddenly crumbles like a child's toy before the water god's power. Luxury coastal villas are lifted off their foundations, floating aimlessly like cardboard boxes on the floodwaters. The train running on the Hindenburg Dam causeway fails to escape, swept off the tracks into the deep sea by the waves. The entire North Frisian archipelago disappears from the map in an instant, leaving behind a sea white with foam. The frantic water rushes into the Elbe estuary, creating a funnel effect that multiplies speed and destructive power. At Cuxhaven, the first port hit, fishing boats are thrown ashore, crushing the rows of houses along the dike. The Airbus factory in Finkenwerder sinks in the sea of water, with dozens of unfinished planes floating aimlessly. The roar of the water sounds like a jet engine, signaling that death is approaching the center of Hamburg. The port of Hamburg takes a direct hit, thousands of containers thrown into the sky like plastic bricks. Giant gantry cranes, the city's icons, buckle and collapse in domino fashion, creating a piercing metallic sound. A super heavy cargo ship is lifted by waves, crashing into the Kohlbrand Bridge, snapping it in two instantly. The historic Speicherstadt with its red brick architecture is submerged, water-breaking windows and flooding warehouses. The Elbphilharmonie stands tall amidst the torrent, its glittering glass reflecting the destruction all around. But then, a giant piece of metal debris crashes in, piercing the theater's glass shell, creating a fatal hole. Water floods the symphony hall, sweeping away red velvet seats and destroying the expensive grand pipe organ. At Landungsbrücken, the historic floating terminal is torn apart, drifting into the buildings inside the city. The old Elbe tunnel turns into a water trap as the flood rushes in, drowning everything inside the tunnel. Water rises 20 meters high, submerging the City Hall Square, turning it into a murky lake. The Alster Lake in the city center overflows, merging with the Elbe River, erasing all geographical boundaries. Luxury cars on Jungfernstieg Street float about, crashing into each other, creating a floating scrapyard. The U-Bahn subway system becomes a giant drainage system, water pouring down tunnel entrances like waterfalls. Underground running trains are surrounded by water, lights going out amidst panic screams. Transformer stations explode, electric sparks shooting out like deadly fireworks on the pitch-black water. In the industrial zone, giant oil tanks are crumpled by water pressure, leaking millions of liters of oil. A random spark meets the oil spill, creating a sea of fire burning fiercely right on top of the floodwaters. Black smoke curls up mixing with white steam, creating an unimaginable hellish landscape on Earth. Chemical plants burst pipes, dyeing the water in colorful hues but filled with deadly toxins. On the A7 Autobahn, thousands of cars are stuck motionless, drivers abandoning vehicles to run in desperation. A family climbs onto a truck roof, hugging each other tight as the water starts licking their wheels. Rescue helicopters hover in the sky but are helpless as the wind is too strong to land. A man swept away by the current tries to cling to a traffic sign but exhausts himself and lets go. Rooftops become desert islands, where hundreds of soaked people huddle waiting for a miracle. The bell tower of St. Michael's Church, a symbol of hope, rings its last tolls before being surrounded by water. A herd of cows from suburban farms drifts into the city, eyes confused amidst the flooded concrete jungle. A pedestrian overpass collapses, forming an artificial dam that causes water levels to rise even higher in the residential area. Glass panels from skyscrapers fall like rain, slicing through the water and striking floating objects. An ambulance floats past the camera, alarm lights still spinning hopelessly under the murky water. Volkspark Stadium turns into a giant swimming pool, the green grass buried under a layer of brown mud. Uprooted trees float with the current, ramming into buildings, creating large cracks on the walls. Water begins to intrude into the bank's gold vault, a place considered impenetrable. At the zoo, wild animals escape their cages, swimming desperately in the floodwaters. A tower crane on a construction site spins in the wind, then collapses onto an apartment complex. Red double-decker buses are overturned, drifting like giant dead fish. An entire famous fish market is washed away, thousands of tons of seafood floating and stinking up the city. Statues of historical figures are decapitated by waves, sinking deep under the mud. Water begins to seep through the protective dikes of a nuclear power plant 50 kilometers away, red alarm lights glowing. A gas explosion shakes an entire neighborhood, blowing out rows of windows in nearby buildings. Night falls, the city sinks into darkness, leaving only the glow of fire and the roar of water. Survivors signal SOS with flashlights from rooftops, tiny spots of light in the black night. A luxury cruise ship is stuck between two high-rise buildings, tilting and waiting to collapse. The water flow begins to slow down, but leaves a thick layer of mud covering everything. A doll floats on the water, eyes wide open, looking up at the black, cloudy sky. Cars are compressed together into twisted metal blocks at the end of a dead-end street. The Welcome to Hamburg sign is covered in mud, revealing only a small rusted corner. A grand piano floats out of a music store, emitting dull sounds as it bumps into things. Offshore wind turbine blades are broken, washing ashore like white dinosaur skeletons. The sky begins to brighten, but that light only illuminates a land of death and desolation. The chaos ends, giving way to a terrifying silence covering the entire northern Germany. The tsunami does not stop at the coast. It continues pushing inland like an insatiable hungry beast. The city of Bremen, 60 kilometers inland, is shocked to see the Weser River level rise suddenly. The famous Bremen town musician's statue is submerged by murky water, leaving only the rooster's head visible. Onshore wind farms are toppled by floodwaters, triggering a domino effect that blacks out the entire north. Darkness covers millions of homes. Heating systems stop working amidst the bone-chilling cold of northern Europe. Mobile cell towers are flooded, leaving millions of people completely cut off from the outside world. Survivors hold their phones high in vain, screens displaying only the terrifying words, "no signal." At the decommissioned nuclear power plant, emergency cooling systems are breached and destroyed by saltwater intrusion. Engineers in protective suits race against time, but radiation levels are rising with every passing second. A column of radioactive steam begins to leak into the environment, spreading an invisible, silent terror. Not far away, industrial chemical tanks rupture, dyeing the water a toxic, unnatural shade of green. This toxic stream flows into residential areas, emitting white fumes that burn the respiratory tract. The city's drainage system is reversed, pushing filthy sewage water back up onto the streets. The risk of disease outbreak becomes real as animal carcasses and garbage float everywhere. On the railway lines, the most modern ice high-speed trains lie motionless, half buried in mud. Thousands of passengers are trapped in sealed train cars with no electricity, water, or fresh air. At Hamburg airport, runways turn into a sea, jet planes crashing into each other and shattering. The collapse of transportation makes the supply of food and drinking water impossible. Supermarkets in unflooded high ground are immediately attacked and looted by panicked crowds. A man clutches a pack of diapers for his child, eyes fierce and ready to fight to protect it. Money becomes meaningless. A bottle of clean water is now more precious than a bar of solid gold. Hospitals switch to disaster mode. Backup generators run out of fuel, patients gasping for life. Surgeries must be performed under flashlight beams, in unsanitary and compromised conditions. The German army is fully mobilized, but even the most modern tanks are helpless against the mud. Military helicopters try to drop relief supplies, but strong winds cause the pallets to fall into the floodwaters. In Berlin, the government holds an emergency meeting. Leaders' faces pale before the scale of the disaster. The Frankfurt Stock Exchange crashes, the DAX index nose-diving vertically, shaking the European economy. Neighboring countries close borders, fearing a wave of refugees and spreading radioactive contamination. The second night falls, cold and hunger begin to kill the weakest among the survivors. Fires still smolder on the water, creating monstrous shapes reflected on the ruined buildings. A group of young people break into a sports store to take kayaks and rubber dinghies. These makeshift boats become the only means of transport in the dead city. At temporary evacuation camps, overcrowding and shortages cause conflicts to erupt among refugees. A child lost from parents sits crying alone in a sea of strangers, hugging a soaked teddy bear tight. Scientists on TV predict water will not recede for weeks, maybe even months. The geological structure of northern Germany has changed forever. Part of the territory has become seabed. Vast pine forests are now just dead, dry trunks, soaking in salt water. Wild animals are forced to migrate south, encroaching into cities that are not yet flooded. The collapse of German industry drags down the entire global economy into recession. But amidst chaos, humanity still shines through acts of brave rescue and helping hands. A firefighter shares his meager ration with a pregnant woman. International aid convoys start rolling from France, Poland, bringing hope to the dead land. Even so, the scars left by the disaster will never be erased. Hamburg, the beautiful port city, is now just a giant pile of rubble lying underwater. Ships stranded on streets will become reluctant monuments to this event. Humans realize how fragile their civilization is before Mother Nature. Germany's future will be a reconstruction spanning centuries, full of pain and loss. Children born in this era will grow up with memories of the day the North Sea raged. And from the ashes, a new life will begin again, but it will never be the same as before.